I'm a grown man, and all I've been doing for the past month is watching Wizard of Oz.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Real Talk. Today we're going to explore whether or not Wizard of Oz is actually about money and economics. I'm sure none of you are confused about that statement that I just made. If you were to ask the general public to list a few movies that were strictly red-blooded American, you'd get your historical dramas such as The Patriot or Glory, or even some blockbuster crowd pleasers like Independence Day or Team America. I'd like to pose the argument that the simple classic that everyone has seen and is the best representation of American culture, believe it or not, is The Wizard of Oz. You'd have a hard time finding somebody who hasn't seen it, and have an even harder time trying to find somebody who didn't like it. It's a simple tale of dreams, fantasy, and adventure. While most countries have a storied past of bloodshed, triumph, and tragedy, the youthful 250-year-old melting pot was originally void of a shared past and has been, and may even currently be in, dire need of a collectively understood myth. What really is we the people unless the people can agree on who we are? Before we get into that, I'll remind you what the story of Wizard of Oz was about. The Kansas orphan Dorothy, dressed in red, white, and blue, befriends a farmer, an industrial worker, and a cowardly would-be ruler. They walk across gold bricks towards a shining city on the hill to talk to an all-powerful leader, only to find out, much like any elected politician, is just a fragile incompetent. Together, the ragtag group of heroes overcome the ever-present threat of evil, only to find out the goals that they were aiming for were within their grasp the entire time. The isolated farmer, found stranded in a field, was already an intelligent problem solver and only needed the opportunity to prove it. The industrial worker, who hardened himself into cold pacification, was always capable of heartfelt compassion and just needed the opportunity to express it. And the terrified king of the jungle, the leader we'd all follow if he'd just step up, found his voice and footing and proved his bravery with every chance. Today we're going to explore what these symbols were building towards and what the potential author's intent was. Today we're talking about the who, what, when, where, and why of The Wizard of Oz. I watched The Wizard of Oz that we've all seen. I've read some of these books, not all of them, and I've also watched the 3 original films that were created by the Oz Film Company, created by L. Frank Baum, who was the original author of the Oz works. And I wanted to see what the through lines were and like what the author's intent truly was, or at least do my best to decipher it. I did come to the conclusion that for some reason, he has an infatuation with having inanimate objects become real. I guess akin to Pinocchio or something along those lines. The Patchwork Girl was just sewn together. The Scarecrow obviously is an inanimate object, so on and so forth. I love Wizard of Oz. I think it should be revisited very frequently, and it's a kids movie, of course. It's a very simple kids movie. I think Wizard of Oz is everyone's introduction to the concept of psychology, because the movie ends with it being a dream sequence, but it doesn't tell you outright. It's just the way the movie is composed. To children, when they see that ending, their like brain puts it together that they're like, oh, it was a dream, but she was like taking the people in her life and then putting it into the dream.
But it wasn't a dream. It was a place. And you, and you, and you, and you were there.
Oh,
The original author of The Wizard of Oz was the ever-theatrical L. Frank Baum, a boundlessly creative man born in the mid-1800s who constantly made attempts to profit from his imagination, but never found true success until the publication of The Wizard of Oz in the year 1900. Though, seemingly never seeing himself as a children's author, L. Frank Baum went on to write 14 books within the realm of Oz. He was an ambitious man and had more in common with Walt Disney than any of his contemporaries. The children's author even had the capitalistic desire to facilitate an Oz-themed amusement park on a remote island for families to visit. Later in his life, at the age of 58, he founded the Oz Film Manufacturing Company and produced 3 films with his personal works as the basis to each tale: The Patchwork Girl of Oz, His Majesty, The Scarecrow of Oz, and The Magic Cloak of Oz. In them, much like the 1939 film we all know and love, has the symbol of a con man with a heart of gold, which ostensibly creates a false environment for protagonists to explore. He's then discovered for his trickery and is accepted for being a fraud, being that the people he bamboozled were made the better for it and saw that their desires were made real. Without this con man character pulling the wool over the eyes of our main characters, they would have never achieved the heights they reached, and the magic he introduced them to would have never been made real.
Coach, I'm sorry.
you know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish. You know why?
No.
It's got a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish, Sam.
I can tell that the intention of these works is L. Frank Baum more or less becoming a surrogate for these tales, essentially inserting himself into the story, saying that I'm a con man, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, these kids are following me, they like my books, I'm gonna keep writing them even though they're not real. He's not being facetious, he's saying outright, I'm a con man. At the end of this tale that changes you, there's no magic here. But it doesn't mean that the magic isn't real. Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it's not real. That's a really weird way to think about it, but yeah, just because it's not real doesn't mean it's not real. The magic was the friends they made along the way. That's what it was.
And I'm not going to leave here ever again. Because I love you all. And, oh, Auntie Em, there's no place like home.
L. Frank Baum had plans to buy an island and then put a theme park world called the Land of Oz on this island where people can come visit. There are actually amusement parks, I want to say in New Jersey, or at least in America, that have a Wizard of Oz themed amusement park. But the thing is, it's like, it went under because nobody gives a shit about Wizard of Oz anymore, which kind of goes into my theme of this video, which is Wizard of Oz and economics go hand in hand. It's very important. This imagery of a bankrupt Wizard of Oz theme park is very poignant. More poignant than I think anyone realizes in this video yet. The theory that I'm about to explain to you guys was a theory that was explained to me when I was in high school by one of my teachers. And this is actually the reason why I observe stories through a symbolic lens, is because of this explanation of Wizard of Oz.
Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Let's talk about what was happening around the time of L. Frank Baum. In the late 1800s, there was a politician named William Jennings Bryan, who was the leader of a populist movement in America. Although he had a seasoned career and impressive ideas, his most notable work was his failed attempt to expand the gold standard for American citizens.
I come to speak to you in defense of a cause as holy as the cause of liberty, the cause of humanity.
I'm jumping around a bit, but the father of capitalism was one Adam Smith, who wrote Wealth of Nations, which was a long-winded 1,000-page way to describe how money moves. After reading it, there's one thing that stood out to me about how this bloodthirsty vampire thought. Corn is necessary, silver is superfluidity. Can you believe this jerk? How evil! If you were to extrapolate this quote from a historical perspective, he's talking about energy. Before combustion engines, or even steam, people used livestock to till fields and travel. Corn was a measurement of prosperity, and the more corn a country had, the more you can infer their wealth. The modern equivalent of that is oil, being that we use it to propel our vehicles and warm our homes. In essence, any good capitalist doesn't have money on the forefront of their mind. I'd argue it'd actually be counterintuitive to their ability to influence. Wow, all this talk about economics is making me hungry for education. Imagine an island with farmland as far as the eye can see. On this island, there are just shy of 200 individual and unique farms. These farms' numbers fluctuating based on mismanagement and takeovers, both hostile and otherwise. Now, this will be the most controversial portion of this segment, but people need to eat food. Meaning different farms in different biomes produce different products at different yields to create different incentives for their different workers to be fed. Pineapples won't grow in mountainscapes and huckleberries won't grow in the tropics. On this island, materials can be finite, so the exchange of them is what measures their value. Instead of lugging around the material they produce to barter and trade, farmers agree on a material to exchange and signify wealth. Now, although these farms trade with one another, they can't exactly trust one another either, so they take their wealth and put it into a stronghold. With the physical manifestation of your wealth being safeguarded, you're going to need a banknote or a document to prove that you're the owner. In short, all of this becomes this. Congratulations! You now understand how a country's currency works, and that's all there is to it. Knowing this information, you'd probably be asking, what's this Willie Bryan guy have to do with it? In his speech, Cross of Gold, he proposes the idea to expand the American reserve currency from simply gold to both silver and gold, so that precious metals would be more readily available to common folk, being that gold, even at smaller fractions, was too expensive for common folk, whereas silver was a reasonable commodity hard-working everyman could achieve. In short, he wanted to give every American the ability to retain their wealth through a cheaper alternative, but universally accepted currency. Unfortunately, his vision never came to fruition, and Dorothy's silver slippers turned ruby red. Now a segment sponsored by the Low-Hanging Fruit Company. Imagine you're a fruit farm trying to sell your product to other farms. You're in competition with other farms, and everyone is doing their best to incentivize others to consume their produce. No one wants to have their produce sit too long, otherwise it'll go stale like blood. It works best when it moves, otherwise it doesn't serve a function. Farms are interacting, exchanging, and sometimes swindling, but for the most part, it's a consensual agreement. One day, the Wiener Schnitzel, sushi, and tomato farms get a little aggressive and start taking other people's properties by force. Unfortunately, the other farms can't defend themselves, though the two apple farms are doing their best to hold their own. But you, the blueberry farmer, randomly get attacked. Turns out, you're pretty good at defending people, so the other farms that would have been wiped out otherwise decide to trust you with their wealth. Congratulations! You now understand 1944's Bretton Woods Agreement, and that's all there is to it. People say money is the root of all evil, but they're only getting it half right. Money is like a weapon. It will only do something bad if the person wielding it wills it to be so. Money is simply a megaphone to people's ideas, good or bad. According to a 2023 article from Medium.com, roughly 42% of the global population make less than $6 a day. And to be considered the top 1% from the planetary perspective, you only need to make $34,000 a year. Crazy to think about. Whew, I got hungry again. Let's go eat. Imagine your blueberry farm is growing in success. In fact, so successful that other farms start measuring their success off of yours. So successful, in fact, that one of your workers devises a way to use livestock to help produce more product. This livestock needs something to eat, maize. You, being the brilliant blueberry farmer that you are, decide to get away from the global currency that everyone agrees on. To artificially inflate your economy, you then go to the biggest maize farmers in the land and have them exchange their maize for your blueberries, forcing everyone on the island to use your blueberries as currency. Congratulations, you now understand 1974's petrodollar deal and fiat currencies. That's all there is to it. When the market is flooded and people return your blueberries, if people decide not to trade in your blueberries anymore due to supply and demand, the amount of blueberries it took to buy this amount of maize now will cost this amount. And this is what the blueberry economy is based off of.
We've come such a long way. The wizard will fix everything.
So with all this information, you're probably thinking like, oh, isn't there a body of governance that like regulates how the American financial system works? And I would say, yeah, that would be the Federal Reserve Bank. Only the thing is, it's not federal, it's not a reserve, and it's not a bank.
And when I come back and bust your ass, we're locking David Ershon in the Federal Reserve.
You still didn't understand the concept.
I don't know what the Federal Reserve is. I don't know what it's there for. In fact, one of the craziest presidents that we've ever had, Andrew Jackson, the first Democratic president of the United States, his dying words were, "I killed the bank." They called him Old Hickory because he would beat the shit out of people with a cane. I think he also has the most kill of any president, which is a crazy claim to fame. His last words were, "I killed the bank," then as an insult, they put his face on money. Also, the Federal Reserve was only created in the 1910s sometime. Up to that point, like, we were on the gold standard. So, like, in the 1910s, the Federal Reserve is like, hey, America, you want to, be part of our whole situation? And America's like, nah, we're, like, good without you. We're actually got a really strong economy. Then, in the 1930s, we leave the gold standard internationally. And then in the 1970s, we leave the gold standard domestically. So, we're telling the other countries, hey, guys, we're leaving the gold standard. And the other countries are like, that's crazy. What do we mean? Like, that's not going to work. And America's like, don't even worry about it. We got a plan. Then the 1970s, Richard Nixon, he was like, hey, listen, we're going to leave the gold standard domestically. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create something called the petrodollar. And then the petrodollar is basically saying we're a fiat currency. And it's just wimbly-wombly in the wind, who gives a... It's the only bad thing Richard Nixon ever did in his life.
That I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
No, anyway, everything that I just explained is called bimetallism. Bimetallism is like basically like we're gonna get off the gold standard, we're gonna go on the gold and silver standard. So the silver standard is just basically like silver is cheaper for people to buy, but the American currency is just like not backed by anything. It's just backed by oil right now, which is like, comment, and subscribe if you like money. Gotcha. You're gonna do it. Who doesn't like money? So what the f does any of this have to do with Wizard of Oz? Henry Littlefield, the man who devised and popularized the allegorical theory, was originally a high school teacher. One night, while reading to his daughters to sleep, he began to discover similarities between the book and the topic he was teaching to his students. The American everyman, farmers, factory workers, and toothless politicians followed the will of the people towards a better economic order. Unfortunately, the populist movement for the bimetal system never came to fruition, and we've seen a gradual and slow descent of the American dollar since the 1970s. After Nixon removed us from the gold standard and made a deal with Saudi Arabia, a 50-year-old deal that has been restructured, damaging the land of the free's grip on the global stage. The worst thing that has come out of the 70s was getting off the gold standard, thanks Nixon, but that's the second worst. The first worst thing that came out of the 70s was disco. Henry Littlefield basically said something to the effect of, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the book, is the allegory of the bimetallism like discussion that was happening in the populist movement in the late 1800s with the William Jennings Bryan guy. There are other things in The Wizard of Oz that when I was reading it, I was like, okay, that's weird. In it, the Scarecrow, they go through a town of porcelain people. For some reason in the book, they focus on this Scarecrow in this moment, saying that the Scarecrow pities the porcelain people. And in the book, the porcelain people are kind of presented like southern like debutantes. So like after the Civil War happened, which obviously is a mainstay in American culture in the late 1800s when the books were written. Hey, check out our video on that. The Scarecrow pities the porcelain people, and I think it's because like after the South lost the Civil War, the people who were like, you know, old money, they didn't know what to do with themselves because like the old money lost their money. And then Scarecrow, who is a farmer, looked at the porcelain people and they're polar opposites of one another, even though I think they come from the same land. So it was really interesting to see this guy who is very durable. He's like not elegant in any way, but he's very durable, and he looks at the people who are elegant but fragile and he pities them, and it's not the other way around. That always stood out to me, one, because it's not in the movie, but two, because it's like, I don't know, that's more wholesome. So wholesome. To have somebody who's like ratty and ragged look at somebody who's like elegant and like kind of feel bad for them. It's actually kind of poetic and nice.
On a witch hunt? No, you're just a little girl.
I'm not as delicate as I look.
That didn't hurt.
Now, is this allegorical theory of a veiled critique of the gold standard real? Originally in the book, Dorothy's slippers were silver, furthering the symbolism of wealth and bimetallism. L. Frank Baum never confirmed this theory though, and the man who proposed this concept was a mere high school teacher who found great comparisons, although I'd argue surface level at best. And the original author's 13 books installments don't support similar ideas. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible for this critique to exist, but the point of a critique is to be as clear and pointed as possible, so you can articulate your viewpoint to another and hopefully convince them to spread your position as well. Not to bury your message deep into the subconscious, to be lost in translation. The allegorical position Henry Little poised is a compelling one, and an excellent tool to explain a historical event as well as the players involved. It's a wonderful fantasy that personally introduced me to the thinking of films and stories from a symbolic perspective, and a great basis for a talking point or a party trick. But unfortunately, after some research, I found that's all it really is. Along with the original paper Henry Little published to describe the allegorical perspective to the tale, he also published an article called The Wizard of Allegory on OzClub.com. In the article, he explained how the original lesson went, originally posing the idea and allowing his students to fill in the blanks themselves, as an exercise in critical and creative thinking. In the article, Henry expresses his gratitude to the explosion of feedback and acceptance to the concept. The very same concept that gave a lowly high school teacher the notoriety that would be the kindling for his successful career in education. Unfortunately, the teaching seemed to turn out to be nothing more than a con, but what a beautiful con it was, and one I'm very happy to be tricked into. Otherwise, you might not be watching me now. I'll leave you with a quote that I've heard from insufferable Redditors. In order to have the American dream, you need to be asleep. And to that I say, everyone needs to sleep. So what's wrong with dreaming?
Wake up, honey.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place.
I mean, like, the Wizard of Oz is kind of surrounded by these bizarre concepts, like the Pink Floyd thing. Like, I've watched it where it does sync up to, I think it's the Wall album. It's hard enough to make a hit album, but like, you're trying to convince me that Pink Floyd consciously went out of their way to like sync it up to Wizard of Oz. It doesn't make sense. I'm assuming because this story is so bizarre and bombastic, you can infer whatever the you want onto it, you know? And that's the important thing, because it's so open and free that you're just like, okay, this is what it means. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with Pink Floyd. The Wizard of Oz is like the most feminine movie ever. It's literally a bunch of girls fighting over shoes.
Shoes. Shoes. Shoes. Oh my god, shoes.
America has the Wizard of Oz as our like allegorical, this is like what America kind of is about. It's about like fantasy and companionship. You can throw the argument of money being in there, but like it's not really what Wizard of Oz is about, even though it's a really compelling like example of what it is about. If you want to talk about Soviet Russia, there is a movie. Do not watch this. This movie is so f***ed up. Cargo 200. That's how you explain Soviet Russia. Everything in Cargo 200, all the characters, all the set pieces, it is an explanation of Soviet Russia. Watch it once, and everything, as long as you're in the symbolic mind, everything's going to flood into you. It's like, oh, this character represents Mother Russia. This character represents the ideal of communism. Cargo 200 is the Soviet Wizard of Oz.
Yes, I'm ready now.
Then close your eyes and tap your heels together 3 times. And think to yourself.
There's nothing like comment, and subscribing. There's nothing like comment, and subscribing. There's nothing like comment, and subscribing. Thank you for watching, everyone. Let me know in the comments below what you think Wizard of Oz is about. Comment below what if you know what the Federal Reserve is. Please, I need to know what it's for. Please, I want to know. Be sure... Is that a drone? That's weird. Whenever I talk about the Federal Reserve... Is it coming closer? I hear a whistling now.